business brokers sell businesses. Today, we will discuss the 9 steps business brokers follow to sell businesses successfully. Hello, I'm Sara Vaziri, and I have with me today Jim Moazez, David Jacobs, Antoinette Gonzales Norris, Roger Civalleri, and Phil Wolfstein. As the first step, we have planning. Roger, do you want to step in and talk about why is it important and what is it? What is planning that we talk about it all the time?
Sure, Sarah. The seller who decides to sell has to think in terms of what it is that he's really selling. First of all, most sellers think they have a gold mine, but to the buyer, it's going to be a method of making money. So instead of anticipating all the sales pitch, you really have to look at the financial side first. Financial side for a typical small to medium-sized business is going to be determined by a buyer based on how much money the company's bringing in. We call that seller's discretionary earnings. It's not the money that's on a tax return. It's the money that the seller actually makes, because that's what the buyer is buying. So first of all, in planning to sell a company, you have to have your financial information in very good shape. The buyer is going to look back about 3 years at least, but probably, and make sure that money is predictable, that it is reliable, that is coming in, and it is predictable that it will keep coming in after they buy the company. That's the whole reason that they're looking at the company. They might love the idea of the company, but they are buying something to make money first and foremost. The more predictable it is that they're going to be making that money, the more the buyer is going to be interested in buying it. So the first thing is you have to get your financial information straight. A good broker is going to help you do that at every step. But what that means is you not only are looking at your balance sheet and income statement, which is critical, and you need 3 years of those, but also how much money are you truly bringing in? Many companies do not show all of that money on their tax return. They might not show it on their financial statements. But the bottom line is, if it is money that can be documented, it's the money that you're making. And that's where the broker can help step in and give you a reliable feel for it. The buyer is going to buy the company based on some multiple of that number in most cases. There's other reasons why people buy companies, but the first and foremost is that they have that information and that they trust that information. So the initial step is you've got to get your financial, it's a financial transaction. So you have to have your financial information in shape, and it has to be reliable and defendable when you get to that point of a person really looking into whether they're going to buy your company.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So, Jim, how about you talk about the second and third steps?
Well, once we get contacted by the potential seller, what we go through is we find out what the motivation is, what is the time frame they're looking at. Then we look at what the business is worth. We do a valuation of the business, so we are not out of the market, and we are not leaving any money on the table. That's very important. But in my opinion, even more important than the value of the business is the structure of the deal. We help the sellers structure it to be beneficial to them, but also to be as attractive to a potential buyer. That is the first reason people buy. Next one is the price or the value. What was the third point you wanted me to talk about?
The documentation that we prepare after finding the value.
Yes. So once we do the valuation of the company, then we want to get all the basic information that any average buyer would like to see when we package the whole deal. So we like to get an insight of what your thoughts is. Well, first of all, the history of the company, how long you have owned it, what you kind of have gone through, what are the challenges, what are the benefits that you have enjoyed over the years. Kind of get to the bullet points of the history of the company, and then also talk about what can be after the sale, kind of giving them an outlook of what to expect if they run the business the way they should. Obviously, there are no guarantees for the future sales or income, but we talk about the potential of the business as well. We package everything. We use different data from you and from the marketplace we find. If applicable, we get pictures to be included. In some occasions, we use a video of the whole premises that the seller doesn't have to be bothered every time someone wants to come and see the facility. They can watch the video that we produce, and they kind of, it's almost like walking the business themselves. And then this way, they have a pretty good, comfortable idea and feeling what to expect in the deal and going forward.
So as a summary, because we have sold so many businesses, we know what buyers will ask when we tell them this business is for sale. And from the beginning, we ask the buyers all those questions and put them in this document so we can expedite the process.
That's
Awesome.
exactly. We ask the question from the seller.
Great. Antoinette, how about the fourth and fifth steps? Do you want to elaborate on them?
Yeah, no, I'd love to talk about, thanks, Jim. So when we find a buyer, I want to talk about finding a buyer and marketing. And along this, confidentiality is very important. So that's kind of the backdrop of selling a business that I want to talk about. So selling a business is not like selling a house. Like when somebody sells a house, it's put on the MLS market or on the MLS. People, neighbors, gawkers, aunts, uncles, friends, they come and look at the house. Everybody knows that it's for sale. Selling a business is very different. Selling a business is super confidential. And like Jim was saying, we have a document that's all been put together. And so now what we do is we write an ad for that business, but we never ever disclose the name of the business. When we write the ad, it's actually a generic ad, to be quite honest. We don't disclose the name. We talk about the sales. We talk about the gross, the margins. We talk about what kind of business it is, the area generically that it's located in. And then we publish it on external sites that are they're sites where buyers tend to look for businesses. And then a lot of us as brokers, like myself, I'm in the Bay Area, and I have a lot of buyers in this area who are tech buyers who have a lot of cash. They're getting laid off and they're looking for a business, or they could be international buyers, and we have a lot of first-time buyers. So we have a big database of those kinds of customers that I will market this listing to. So that's the first part. So then I get phone calls from all these buyers. Maybe there's 20, buyers that will come in. So I have phone calls with them, and I still don't disclose the name of the business. What I do is I have them sign the NDA. They fill out a buyer profile. I have conversations with them on the phone, and I make sure that they have enough money. I ask them questions. I get to know them. I want to find out, make sure that they're the right fit for the business. And then if I'm comfortable, then I start to disclose more information about the business. It's very, it's all confidential. I share financials. And the whole thing is, we're matchmakers. We're trying to put a buyer and seller together. And so ultimately the goal is let's say I have two buyers that I introduce to the seller. And we do this either on a Zoom call, a phone call, or we actually meet at the place of business when employees or customers are not around. I could talk about this all day long, but ultimately our goal is to find a buyer for your business. We want to transfer the business. We want happy customers. We want happy existing employees. We want sales to continue to grow up. And really, we're trying to help you to retire from your business and launch into your next phase of life. Thanks.
Thank you, Antoinette. So yes, that confidentiality is really important. And the main difference we have when we want to sell the business compared to selling a house that they put it in the market and everybody knows.
Yeah.
So David, how about you touch about the next two steps, finding real buyers, purchase agreement?
Sure. So I'll pick up where Antoinette left off. And I would say that if it's it's a good business, meaning it's making money and it's not owner dependent, there will be lots of inquiries. Tens to hundreds of buyers will approach us wanting to learn about the business. And it's really up to the broker to protect the seller from the looky-loos. When I get an inquiry and it's a buyer that I don't know, I'm really looking at three different areas to say, is this the type of buyer that I would want to introduce to my client, the seller? I'm looking, do they have industry experience? So like I work in technology companies, do they have any kind of background in technology? Other industries are the same. You don't just jump into owning a restaurant. You have to know how the restaurant business works, or construction. Do they have the financial ability to purchase a business? So, how do they present themselves? Do they have the cash available? Do they have loans in place? Do they have a family or a friend that's going to back them in the acquisition of a business? And then the hardest thing to ascertain that really takes time is the personality, because the last thing I want to do is introduce my client to a very difficult person to work with. So, you talk to people on the phone, you get to know them, you ask them some questions, you see how they behave. Are they prepared and ready to go? Do they have experience? Do they know what they're looking for? All this kind of builds into the personality of the buyer. And once I'm confident that this is a real buyer, they have the money and they know what they're talking about, then I will start exchanging confidential information about the business, always withholding something. And then at some point they will, I usually use Zoom, but we could use telephone, or some businesses you would meet in person. We would have a face-to-face meeting where the buyer and seller will meet each other and make sure there's compatibility there. And so the next, and then the next stage is, guiding an accepted offer through to closing, and what does the paperwork look like? And there's really two ways in our world that this happens. For smaller, mostly Main Street businesses, there's standard forms that the industry uses. Here in California, our trade association, CAB, actually publishes these forms, and I think all the brokers use the same form. They just change the logo, but it's standard stuff. And all of us that work in that space, know these forms inside and out, and they know what is meant by these terms and what's expected from both parties. And for larger deals, like in the lower middle market, there's typically attorneys involved drafting customized purchase agreements. And really the value add of a broker is, the process, and where deals typically go off the rails. So kind of how to bring the parties back together if there's a point of dispute or delay, and understanding what's going on. And then, I typically set up kind of a weekly conference call where, everybody gets together on a Zoom, and, if the lawyer has a problem with the other lawyer, they speak up. If the buyer or seller are misunderstanding or getting cold feet or something like that, it comes out early so that we can try to resolve it. And I find that this keeps the deal on track, and they generally close pretty much on time. It's never exactly the day everybody predicts, but within a day or two, and the money gets transferred and the deal closes. So that's how I work with my clients to keep the deal moving forward and get all the paperwork in place.
Great. So actually in this stage, either with a purchase agreement or something like LOI, we try to get them agree on the main points before we go to the next stage that Phil we want to talk about it for us, the due diligence stage. Phil, you're muted, Jess. Phil, you are muted.
Sorry, I had my mute on. So thank you, Sarah. Following up from David, so now that you get to that stage where you have an LOI or you have an asset purchase agreement or a stock purchase agreement that's on the table between the parties, the first immediate step would be within a day or two to have a buyer and seller disclosure statement issued. That's typically a more extensive document on the part of the seller, who's going to have about a 3-page disclosure statement. A buyer's is about a page long, but that's an opportunity for both parties to pretty much lay bare any of the facts that they need to state. Total transparency and disclosure is critical. It will come out. We all know that it will come out before close of escrow. If there's problems relating to regulatory issues, maybe workman's comp issues, financials issues or problems or issues with the landlords, those things will come out. So the earlier they're disclosed and ideally at the beginning of this process, it helps all the parties to focus on how to overcome those challenges. Everything can be addressed and can be resolved if you have a willing buyer and seller. Both parties want to get this deal done. There are solutions to all of that, but it needs to be disclosed early and in full. And once that's done, you're in due diligence, what we call due diligence, and that's where the buyer and the seller, each, it's not a one-way street, are going to verify and confirm all of the information, the financial information, visits to the site on a location to confirm inventory, equipment, may possibly identify the key employees and the processes within that business, all the things that you need to know as the new owner, the buyer coming in. And it's also an opportunity for the seller to make an assessment on the buyer. Are they the right party? Is the chemistry right? Do they know how to take over this business and run it? Because generally speaking, it's a very big event. It could be a legacy business, a family business. They want to make sure that they have the right party taking over the business and that they're qualified. Then once we go through due diligence, that can be depending on the business, 7 to 10 days. By mutual agreement, it can be extended if there's some real reason why it needs to be, but that's generally specified in the purchase agreement, whether it's an LOI or purchase agreement. And at the end of that period of time, we then go into conditions release. And a conditions release is, by this stage, we've already talked to the landlords or worked out new lease arrangements and other issues that's the key precedent issue in escrow that we need to address in order to get a conditions release signed by both parties, a simple form, and then open escrow, go into escrow. And that's along with the purchase agreement or LOI, we've already received a deposit check that's held, and those funds would normally then be used to open escrow and proceed.
Awesome. Thank you. So let me review the 9 steps, and then if anybody has any points to add, please join me. So the first step was planning. After that, broker opinion of value or valuation. Then we had preparing the documents. After that, identifying the buyers, marketing, finding real buyers, purchase agreement, disclosure and due diligence, and at the end, conditions removal and closing. Does anybody have anything to add to what we discussed in this meeting?
I'd like to say that you've done a great job of outlining the process of selling the business. A lot of owners and operators are under the misconception that selling in a business is an event, that you put your business up for sale and it gets sold. And there's a lot of moving parts, as you can see here from this discussion, and it can take 7 to 9 months typically from the beginning, from that initial meeting until the close of escrow, and it certainly can take longer in some cases, but it's a process, and that's an important thing for the owners, for the seller to understand.
Hey, Sara, the other thing that I would like to add is that when you sell a business, to make sure that you find someone who's going to work with you, a broker that you really like and trust in the process and that has experience. Because during this entire process, there's a lot of ups and downs, and you want to trust that individual. And a lot of times that broker, you're going to have a very close relationship, and they're your advocate. They're quarterbacking the deal to the very end. So that's an important part.
Thank you. Jim, do you have anything to add? Roger?
The only thing that I would probably add, and everything everyone said was so correct. Keep in mind that no matter what the deal is, on average, it will die 3 times before closing. And it's the job of the brokers, such as ourselves, to revive and get that energy back into the deal and then close the deal.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and have a great day.
Thanks
It's a
for
pleasure.
organizing,
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thanks, everyone.